Well, all right. Good morning, everybody. I have 8 o'clock on my watch. Room 1 Alpha. We're here for USS Abraham Lincoln Full Spectrum Combat Deployment, ABE Day 3. So appreciate y'all being here at 8 a.m. So you may have sacrificed the 7 to 9 breakfast. So thank you if you missed out on that to come to this. Yeah. All right, so this is, for me personally, this is kind of a special brief. It brings together quite a lot of themes in today's modern day Navy, and it doesn't really matter whether you're a sailor, whether you're a sailor on a ship, a sailor on a shore, a govy, working at a SysCom, a type commander, fleet commander, or an industry partner. Everybody here has relevance to what we're going to talk about. So USS Abraham Lincoln, we went on a deployment with some enhanced capability that has been quite a journey to bring to a fruition and us to be able to talk about today. So I'm really excited. We also have several sailors from Abraham Lincoln here, and we'll be joined here shortly. So if you take no message away from this brief, at least please talk to the sailors that are here. We'll connect you with them after, so you could get a perspective of what it's like today and the modern Navy as we move forward. Next slide. I'd also be remiss if I didn't introduce my slide changer. I was the Combat Systems Officer on USS Abraham Lincoln from August of 2022 to December of 2024. This was my relief, Commander Keshti. He is the current Combat Systems Officer of USS Abraham Lincoln. Also in the room, I see Commander Eric Shuey, who is the Combat Systems Officer on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. So you have from the resource in here, you got current relevant experience that we can offer you if you have any questions. This brief will take probably about 40 minutes for me to talk through. I would ask that you hold your questions to the end, and we'll have a solid Q&A period. And then if anyone wants to link up after this discussion, I'm happy to hang around as long as we need so I can address any further questions or any interest areas. Okay, so we're going to go through some of our deployment highlights. I'm going to talk about our sailor edge afloat and ashore journey that started with catnip. Talk a little bit about. I come up with a new term called full spectrum combat. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to focus on how do we win today in the modern day network-centric warfare environment, and how it correlates to sailor health, readiness, and morale. That's a fascinating topic to me because the technology that you bring to the table, that technology is game-changing, but it's not game-changing unless we have a healthy sailor that knows how to use it. So there is a definite human in the loop there that we all have to be well understanding in how we are providing modern-day technology to the fleet that is ready for combat, and that we have sailors that are ready to use it. Talk about a little bit of our metrics, and then I'm going to go quickly through all of the use cases that we use sailor edge afloat and ashore over the past 2 years, more so focusing on deployment and how it helped enable the mission of Carrier Strike Group 3, Carrier Strike Group 3 Information Warfare Commander, as well as the commanding officer of USS Abraham Lincoln. They will be joining us here later and provide some closing remarks. Okay, let's go next slide. Here is our deployment highlights. So USS Abraham Lincoln left San Diego on July 11th, 2024, expecting a 7th Fleet deployment. You know, they say when you have a plan, things change. We got out into the 7th Fleet AOR, and about day 1, the Secretary of Defense ordered Carrier Strike Group 3 to immediately respond to the crisis in the Middle East. So at that moment, we had to completely shift gears. Fortunately, during our training and readiness cycle, we trained for high-end fight conflict both in 7th Fleet and in 5th Fleet. So we were already ready to go. And all we had to do was pivot our mindset and our track and make best speed to the Middle East. We sailed 55,000 miles, circumnavigating over half the globe to get there. We sailed through the South China Sea, through the Straits of Malacca. We then sailed around the bottom of India into the Arabian Sea, where we operated for not quite 3 months straight, both in the Northern Arabian Sea as well as working the Gulf of Yemen, this entire AOR. Our Carrier Strike Group 3 ships operated in the Red Sea, in the northern Red Sea, and collectively, we were a part of all of the conflicts that you are aware of in the national news. We were participating in the Deter Iran mission. We were participating in counter Houthi, both offensive and defensive operations, the safety of maritime shipping, as well as defense of Israel from the Red Sea. So that was going on for us during our deployment. And we had a stellar record of our flight schedules. Our safety record was pristine. The readiness of the sailors demonstrated itself every day in those muscle movements as we had to do dynamic combat in a modern day combat environment. So that's kind of our deployment highlights at a quick look. Let's go next slide. Okay, so the Sailor Edge Afloat and Ashore journey actually started roughly 2 years ago with an idea and a funny acronym called CATNIP, which stands for Commercial Afloat Transformational Network Infrastructure Project. CATNIP was the name of the IATT that we got to meet a goal to demonstrate gigabit speeds to an aircraft carrier, and what can you do with it? Now, CATNIP was never intended to be the long-term name. It was intended to generate momentum. Well, it kind of stuck, and here we are. So at the end of that 6-month IATT, we had a 6-month IATT, and IATT stands for an interim approval, interim authority to test. We have to, as we develop modern day systems, we have to incorporate all of the cybersecurity elements and all of the DoD and DISA requirements to create a system that will work at scale and be cyber secure. We had a 6-month period to do that. We named that 6-month period CATNIP. We then, at the end of that 6-month period, concluded with by obtaining and earning, through everyone's hard work, a 3-year authority to operate under the title Sailor Edge Afloat and Ashore. We added some modern capability that had not been cyber accredited in there, and that was what we were doing over that 6 months. However, the CATNIP name stuck, so we had to revise the Sailor Edge Afloat and Ashore to also incorporate that nomenclature, as it was quite popular in the fleet. And our goal was to achieve gigabit internet to CVN-72 to represent and show the opportunity space to go fleet-wide with that capability, focusing on 4 main areas. These were our 4 centers of gravity. These 4 areas haven't changed in 2 years, the listing of them. However, we've learned a lot about how to extract value from that capability to fit a model of these 4 areas. And those 4 areas are how we interoperate with multi-wide area networks. That could be any source. Just think of it as any source of internet. It could be satellite internet connectivity. It could be terrestrial internet connectivity. It could be 5G. It could be point-to-point links. It's really any source. How do we create the best scalable value from the technology today for any moment that we may interoperate with? We then also focused on software-defined networks. It's a pretty deep topic area. I'm not going to go heavily into it. However, if we do have some SDN experts in here and you're interested in what we focused on, we can meet separately. But software-defined networks is how we can pivot and scale our software technology using software-based network principles and modern-day encryption and control those encryption algorithms. We then also focused on enterprise local area networks. That's just internal LAN. Industry, y'all know how to do this the best, and we in the Navy are trying to pivot to match your pace and your practices, and we focused on best practices and how to do that. And then lastly, we focused on how you develop a standardized guest Wi-Fi and user policy manager and show the value of that. A user policy manager, think of it as how you manage accounts on a ship. The way we currently do it is with Active Directory and those types of databases. However, what we find is as we start to strap applications that require account structure, we end up having to use a lot of middleware and glueware to transition account structure over to modern day applications. So we try to figure out how do we do a user policy manager and develop and use that user policy manager to standardize DoD guest Wi-Fi. The impetus behind that was you kind of go to a short command and you have to know somebody in order to get a wireless capability. And that just kind of seems kludged. So we wanted to come up with a standardized way to do that so everybody, whether you're a ship or ashore, could have the opportunity to get a standardized way to provide wireless service to that ship where approved. Now, all of this is at the availability of mission. Okay, so while we develop policies to mitigate risk, it is all at the commanding officer's discretion for when we are allowed to operate these networks at sea. And commonly what we can do is we can pivot the networks and we could develop a variety of opportunities in how we scale that. But every one of these is at the commanding officer's discretion, depending on the mission. Sailor Edge Afloat and Ashore is transitioning. So we went from catnip to C2, and now it's going to a program of record under PLEO Digital called Flank Speed Wireless. This is in the overall evolution. We're going to have a couple of slides at the end that describe the impetus and requirement for that. And so that's fantastic. The ultimate, I mean, every good idea that doesn't scale doesn't provide ultimate value. So in order to have the pacing plan and how to scale, it has to transition to a funded and sustainable program of record. That is being discussed at all levels of the Navy right now, and it will be transitioning under PLEO Digital under the terminology Flank Speed Wireless. Next slide. This picture was taken at the top of Cabrillo Monument on Abraham Lincoln's transit in to home when we came in. Pretty cool picture showing Abe in the fog. It's also a metaphor. We operate in times where we do not see what's ahead of us. Okay, so where we are operating in areas of potential unknown in the fog, potentially the fog of war, we rely on muscle memory and capability. The capability is what industry brings. The muscle memory are the sailors using that capability. The tie-in of those two is how we win. This full spectrum combat term, we're just taking a crack at what we think about that. Ready sailors with high morale operating cutting edge and relevant systems for personal, business, and tactical operations. Our devices now are an extension of ourselves, and we use those devices in ways that we get value from them as we execute our day-to-day operations. We also bucket it and say we have 3 types of bandwidth or throughput. We use bandwidth for personal use cases. We use bandwidth for work applications that enhance our quality of work. And we also rely on bandwidth for tactical operations. We rely on all 3 of those for when it's time to turn the capabilities off, should that be required. And if the data is not on board, you don't have it. Okay, so the whole intent, enable sailors to be ready, enable technology, use technology to get the data on board for when we are called to go do our thing. A lot of times in ABSEA briefs, we miss the why. So we tried to really focus on the why in this brief, and that is that we are a highly connected, developing, and sophisticated society. Even the United States of America, we are heavily developing based on technology. And the outcome of our daily interactions, the outcome of our daily routine is a product of the quality of our connections, with the people that we connect with and those systems that we interoperate with. Okay, so we're trying to provide a way to think about that and show how it's tactically relevant in the modern day technology as we develop and continue to receive technology from the fleet. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about morale. So I wanted to revisit the basic. It's actually law, Title 10 law, that the commanding officer is responsible to provide morale. That is a direct quote from United States law. It is also included in the Title 10 law for the responsibility of the SECNAV. The SECNAV controls a lot of our budget, and it is law that they provide morale. I also want to pull a quote from the Ike CO, Captain Chris Chowder-Hill, he says, this is a quote on Facebook, "I still meet people that don't understand what morale means. If some of the greatest military leaders of all time claim that morale can tip the scale in war, why should we not become the samurai masters of creating morale?" Morale is spiritual fire. Okay, so pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. You create morale for sailors using modern day systems that they can use those systems further for their work and in tactical operations. We can win. It's also not meant to, the discussion of sailors interoperating with networks is not meant to devalue personal interactions, okay? Sometimes, a lot of times, a face-to-face interaction is exactly what is needed. And a lot of times nowadays, folks are interacting in their communities of interest that develop their own identity through online connections. And what we tried to do was enable a safe space for those online connections to allow sailors to continue their continuity of life while we are potentially in a conflict. Again, when it's time to turn those connections off, the sailors are ready to run to the fire. They are ready to run to the fight. And that is what we saw on Abraham Lincoln. Next slide. The connected sailor is a more combat-ready sailor, okay? The old adage is, hey, when you leave for deployment and you come back, it's the day after you left for deployment. As we're connected, that may not be the truth anymore, because when we are connected throughout our deployment, we are keeping up with those elements of our life that may be most impactful, and as a result, we can enable situations where sailors feel like their families are taken care of because they're actually taking care of their families while they're connected at sea. They will also come back to better relationships. And as we do that, when sailors feel like they're taken care of in their personal and professional lives, they're going to be more ready. Their muscle movements as we operate the systems in tactical conflict will come through because they're not worried about situations and circumstances at home because they're handling them in advance. That is one of the ways that we provide readiness to the fleet while we provide parity of combat technology. I threw my picture up there. Okay, when deployed spouses come home to their loved ones, it's impactful. Okay, so it doesn't matter what rank you are, how you identify, or what your race or color is. It's just basic love. Okay, and when you're able to feel that continuity of those connections when you're out at sea, like I said, the connected sailor is going to be a more combat-ready sailor. It also requires a strict balance of policy, command culture, and just basic human needs. Okay, so that is one of the things we focused on in Abraham Lincoln was we have limits of how sailors are allowed to connect and when to connect. Those limits are healthy. Okay, when we're out at sea, we do still have limitations in throughput and what we can do and when. We have to follow DISA policy. We have to follow fleet commander policy, carrier strike group requirements. So those policies is what help us enable a safe experience as we maintain our connections on these systems that we may also be passing quality work and tactical traffic through. So let's go a little forward. This next slide. So this is kind of one of those slides that you see in like, hey, how do you be the most effective? And it's how you kind of think about happiness versus lack of happiness. Lacking happiness, reduced motivation. So when we have reduced motivation, we tend to have less drive and enthusiasm, which means we're probably not going to get after the mission as well as we would have had we had that drive and enthusiasm, right? We're going to be more likely to accept the goals. We're going to be more likely to be involved in those goals by being happy. Impaired focus, that's distraction, right? You want to keep a sailor in the game. We want to prevent distraction. Lacking happiness, lower resilience. You're exhausted. You're emotionally and mentally exhausted when you feel like something is happening at home and you don't have the resources to address it. And then also physical degradation, that lower resilience translates to physical degradation, which is you're just tired. But what happens if we have modern day systems we could add some bullets about effectiveness, utilizing modern day technology, which is providing sailors updated and relevant technology. You know, when that new iPhone or Android device comes out, a lot of people are excited to get it. Sailors will also be excited to get technology in the fleet that supports their work processes, as well as those systems that they may take into the fight. So as we provide those modern day relevant systems, the sailors feel a higher amount of accountability when they like the system and they can feel like the system meets their needs. And I don't think that is any unique with the United States Navy. I think this is a foundational element in all of business and all of industry is those things that you use in your workplace. How do they actually satisfy getting to what you're supposed to do in the mission? Next slide. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the internet gap. Okay, so if you're going to procure internet for your home, I think you're probably going to get 250 megabits per second to a gig. And that's for a family of 4 to 6. The actual national average in 2025, United States, the download speed is 206 megabits per second with 60 megabits per second on the upload. So the average is about 250. Now, professionals like y'all in here, you're probably at a minimum getting a gig. You may even be like, hey, I can get that 2.5 gigablast, you know, the new greatest thing for $149.95, or you're going to get a gig for like $79, or you're going to get 250 for like $59 or whatever. Okay, that's for 4 to 6 users. Let's compare and contrast that with what an aircraft carrier gets. Right now, before Sailor Edge are floating ashore, the aircraft carrier speeds was on average 16 to 48 megabits per second for 5,000 people. You do the math there. That 5,000, 20x reduced speed and 1,000x increase in users. That creates a bottleneck. That creates a bottleneck in tactical capability. That creates a bottleneck in basic work function. That creates a bottleneck in sailors being able to stay connected. So that is the bandwidth gap that is our why as we get after that, because we need to be able to, in order to win in the modern day, we have to address that gap. So as we did that, as I mentioned, our goal is to get 1 gigabit per second to Abraham Lincoln, and even that for 5,000, right? You're going to have some limitations there, but that is a start. Next slide. We did it. So here is a period where we're transferring 1.2 gigabits per second. We are holding a gigabit per second on the download and 200 megabits per second on the upload. So that's 1.2. We were doing this regularly, but to sustain that, these are more ideal conditions. Now, when you can do this, it's kind of like the yeah, so what? What do you do? What does that equate to over a deployment? Let's go next slide. Here's our deployment specs. 1.0 A sub O, not one equipment failure over 2 years. 780 terabytes transferred over 5.5 months. 780 terabytes. I set a goal for a petabyte, but I missed it. So there's room for my relief to excel there. Daily average transfer of data, 4 to 8 terabytes. That is a 50x of what we can do with our current capability. 50x. We're just scratching the surface. We manage over 7,000 IP addresses daily. 2 full-time sysadmins. 2. 1 person on the day, 1 person at night. 2. We average 500 to 800 megabits per second all day, every day that the capability was enabled. We did turn the capability off as required for our mission. And like was mentioned, 1.2 gigabits per second. So now it's like, well, what do you do with it? For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to go fairly quickly through these slides so that I could leave time for 20 minutes for discussion, Q&A. But the next group of slides buckets quality of life, quality of work, tactical. Tactical, I have to be very high level on, but you'll get the hint. And all of these contribute to sailors with having high morale and our ability to execute the mission anytime, anywhere. Next slide. Okay, so the quality of life use cases, think about what you do in your personal life That's all that is, okay? However, when you have more time on a ship, you can more focus on personal life areas that may offer you some improvement. Example, we had 3 people pursue PhDs. We had quite a few people pursue master's degrees. We had people attending ceremonies, weddings. We had people watching youth sports. You go to youth sports games, you see those big tall poles, they have a camera on top of them, and you go to some streaming service. People are like, I watched my son hit a baseball for the first time, okay? Attending religious events, personal legal challenges, that's one of the things that can really affect a sailor is if they're going through something and they feel like they don't have the resources to address it, that's gonna add them anxiety, lower their resilience, exhaustion, distract. So sailors they have services now to where they can continue if they have the problem they're working through. They have those services to reach off ship while we continue to help them on ship with face-to-face. And I think you get that list. Next slide. Check this out. 38 babies born on deployment, 38 first interactions of a father with their newborn. So look at this guy. He's like, oh man, this is the first time walking off the ship. It's like, don't drop the baby, don't drop the baby. But look at that little guy, like, just hug onto him. That is a moment that you don't ever get. And allowing that sailor to participate in the lead up to while they are deployed as well as interacting is game changing. Next slide. Content streaming. So content streaming, this is the one that is a little cringy because content streaming is high bandwidth. It's also fraught with challenges and risks. So we worked around that to enable the best experience we have, understanding there are current limitations. There's limitations with respect to copyright. There's limitations with respect to streaming services as well as just basic access. So we worked within the capability to provide a best effort content streaming throughput under existing policy. So Ship's MWR account can purchase like DirecTV or DirecTV streaming service on a commercial account. And then we try to enable sailors to be able to pull down like Netflix or whatever via their own personal account. That bandwidth, it's inefficient, and we should continue to get after ways to make that more efficient. Like an example is like if you go on an airplane, you got a little screen in front of you, you pick the movie, it just starts playing, or you get the airline application, you go on the airline Wi-Fi, you then have access to their content. There's lots of different ways that we can make that more efficient so we're not waiting to get the DVDs or whatever through the mail, that we should pursue all those use cases. And those are all just metaphors for higher end use cases that we should equally pursue through industry. We also focused on blocking copyright infringement and activities that we're not allowed to pass. So we did incorporate all those policies in our capability, in our configuration, and we watched like the Mike Tyson fight. We watched Army Navy football games Sundays when football was going on, basketball, baseball. It was like folks wanted to keep up with their teams, participate in fantasy sports, whether you're doing it against shipmates on the ship or continuing in your social circles. That was pretty popular. The fantasy sports is pretty easy because it's just basic web traffic. But then they could participate and watch the games and participate in the online communities when we had that allowed. So that was pretty neat. We did track.
It's not your fault. That was Netflix.
Yeah. We overloaded Netflix. I'm just kidding. But I also we tracked all the traffic, and we could we have some metrics. I don't have them in this brief, but we're looking to kind of pivot from what we learned as well as how to keep going. Next slide. E-commerce and you wouldn't believe how much value a sailor gets by being able to buy something and it being delivered on a ship. So there's a time lag. It's about a month. However, like I'm walking down this, you see the replenishment at sea process from helicopter landing in the Middle East to it going down to the hangar bay all day into sunset. You can see that's roughly about 400 to 800 pallets of mail coming. That's mail coming from home, as well as mail coming from, if you may have bought something online, to the fleet post office. So I'm walking down the passageway of the ship, but I see a sailor like going quickly with their box. I'm like, what'd you get? She's like, I don't know, I forgot. So like, I'm just saying there's like rewards and like, hey, you bought something like a month ago, like you may not remember what the heck's in the box. Like you put like 4 things in there and what the sailors are doing. So there's some excitement there. The sailors were also buying little items for their friends. And so it's a way that it's almost like a secret Santa, right? And then also it's a way when you're out at sea extended for long periods of time, you may not have brought everything you need, and you may want that one special like shampoo or whatever. It's the make or break for you. And so we were staying stocked up on that. Next slide. Social media, we ran all of our social media, official social media from the ship. We followed the fleet policies. There's a lot of details in how and what the ship's account posts, but that was all done through the capability. Next slide. Okay, so this one is solid. So we were in the most desolate waters, and we wanted to show how we could remotely cyber monitor all activities on the ship. So we had a C2 node in Norfolk connect to USS Abraham Lincoln and execute our annual cybersecurity scans from halfway around the world over the software-defined network with the modern IPsec encryption tunnels. And we did it. We scanned all of our devices. We validated our authority to operate compliancy. They validate the firmware and the device structure online, and we did that in the most desolate part of the planet. Okay, so that demonstrates that an element of scalability, that moving forward, we should enable this type of a capability fleet-wide, writ large. But then what we also used was we were helping other ships come up and adapt to the capability. Like Harry S. Truman out there is right out there right now in the fight, along with USS Carl Vinson. We were remotely connecting them and helping them come online in addition to the resources that were on the shore. What that provides is a crowdsourced support capability 24/7 anywhere in the world. Okay, so it's not like you're relying on, oh man, I gotta wait for Monday when they come in the office. The fleet can be a part of the support strategy, and by providing that technology, we can provide enhanced support. That was what we wanted to show in this use case. Next slide. All right, so I'm gonna go pretty quick. We use it to talk to ombudsman. We talk to interoperability with the shore. We use it to talk to gains, losses, even medical stuff, dental stuff. We did live dental imaging. Those imaging, if you need to make a custom crown, they're like 500-600 megs. You can't transfer them over current networks. We use this to transfer them to the shore, get the crown made, comes back quick over on the COD. Interoperability with Navy medical database. None of those medical databases were made to work on ships, so it's kind of cumbersome. So we started to show how when you offload official traffic to a capability like this, it frees up tactical traffic for the tactical system on the native network to be more effective, okay? So that was fantastic. Next slide. Here's an officer commissioning his wife. First ever time we had an officer commission his wife from the ship. His wife was at the recruiting station. We used Nautilus embarkables as well as flank speed, and an officer commissioned his wife on the ship from this capability. And if you don't believe it, let's go next slide, show the video.
Having been appointed as an ensign
in the United States Navy,
in the United States Navy,
do accept such appointment,
do accept such appointment,
and do solemnly swear
and do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely,
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties of the office
discharge the duties of the office
on which I am about to
You
enter.
can see the Nautilus embarkable
on which I am
right
about
there.
to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Right.
Thank you.
Go back. Yeah. All right. So if that doesn't make you feel proud, right? We can forge the next generations of warfighters with capability too. Next slide. So Nautilus embarkables. That's what this thing is right here. It was my laptop I used to interoperate with flank speed, and there are too many advantages by having these on the ship. I could have real-time access to really anybody in the O365 DoD inventory, but direct through them. I was asking people for help when we exhausted our own online ability, and sometimes just by asking a question, you will make major breakthroughs that you avoid CAS reps and you get left of issues rather than them catastrophizing on for days and weeks at a time that just consumes everybody's time is not their focus. So Nautilus embarkables help provide quality of work connectivity at modern day at scale. And this was the use cases that we used for all those. This brief will be available after this. And if there's any curiosity in any one of these use cases, we'll go in much greater detail later on. But some of the stuff that's impactful is DoD safe large file downloads, as well as cybersecurity software updates. You don't do that efficiently over high Earth orbiting satellites and the current networks on the ship. So we use Nautilus embarkables to also stay cyber secure, cyber safe, and keep our hardware firmware updated. Next slide. We also used it to interoperate with the Italian aircraft carrier Cavour on multiple occasions. One thing that's fascinating with operating with a coalition in modern day, where we have these capabilities, you kind of want to know who you want to fight with. If we're going into a fight with the coalition, and the aviators were actually seeing their coalition partners on their social media presence sites, and you get a sense of who they are. And then as we do the meet and greets, everyone comes together much quicker, and then we do the exercises, and we can demonstrate full coalition interoperability, which we did multiple times during our deployment. Next slide. Tactical connected systems, again, we're gonna keep this light and airy. However, a lot of tactical connected systems are actually approved to write commercial, and we should utilize that opportunity to our advantage. What we get by connecting tactical connected systems where approved over commercials, we get high speed, low latency. And we also get preferred routing paths where we get the most of those capabilities where we're allowed to use them. And there's a lot of use cases for this. We demonstrated several during our deployment, and we were able to demonstrate some game-changing capability that we will pivot moving forward on. Next slide. That tactical system also allows rapid capability insertion of theater-specific systems, and we showed how quickly you can actually integrate a system. We had approval in our authority to operate that allowed those systems to be connected. So we did follow the right processes and procedures to be able to interoperate with those systems before we did, and we did definitely show that capability. Okay, F-35 is like a massive thing, right? It's like that thing eats and breathes data daily. And that data has to interoperate with shore. So here's an example of us showing how we were providing regular interoperability of F-35 with the shore side that Navy.mil reported. So Navy.mil reported on hey, they delivered F-35 mission data file updates in record time. Yeah, we were doing that. And then they reported, hey, first combat strikes in Yemen from F-35. The enhanced nature of those strikes was because we were able to do this. And the theme at the bottom is alive and well. The software updates are only getting bigger. They're only getting more complex. And if you can't get the data on board, probably going to be at a loss, right? So large file transfer capability increases combat readiness. Next slide. Okay, we also demonstrated bring your own bandwidth, BYOB. So that is a lot of the warfare theaters, the fleet commanders in those theaters, they are buying bandwidth officially for their purposes. We can interoperate with that to be more effective. Going quickly, we did several demonstrations of bring your own bandwidth. We utilized CENTCOM PLEO for coalition comms over commercial. That was fascinating and extremely effective. We demonstrated Chimeta OneWeb terminals, mobility all around the world, Hughes OneWeb, and then a few others we'll go through very quickly, and then we're done. Next slide. The Chimeta capability in OneWeb, fantastic. Okay, I'll leave it at that. We demonstrated kind of compare and contrast different waveforms, different technologies there. all of the PLEO providers that I have gotten to work with, the service is absolutely fantastic. And all of the providers want to participate, and they want to move the needle, which we are incredibly grateful for. And that is one of the benefits we get from being able to be at ABE SEA and those types of events, is to connect sailors with providers as well as folks like me, because we should absolutely continue to move the needle with PLEO technology. 1 gig's the goal. What's next? 10 gig? Heck yeah, let's do it. Next slide. 5G. So we also worked through the 5G MVNO. That stands for Mobile Virtual Network Operator capability. That's like, you could think of cellular over a specialized kind of circuit that you could do literally anywhere in the world and it's protected. So we demonstrated in Guam. The intent was to use the Guam, some of the Guam demonstrations and see how it scales to the ships. Turns out it does. So we had 6 cellular antennas, and through an effort through a company, and we connected those to the local cellular sites, and we just augmented the bandwidth for all of the needs of what we were doing. So we thought, hey, if it works in port, does it work to sea? This is total curiosity in motion. So what we did was we grabbed some speaker stands, kind of like that, and we arranged these cellular antennas in a kind of like a Christmas tree, actually a half Christmas tree. Go next slide. And we said, hey, how far will it work out to sea? So we tested this. These are very well-paved merchant traffic paths, and we only had this up during this little portion, but we were able to achieve a 5G connectivity in excess of 100 miles from shore, just by having these little arrangement of cellular antennas connected to a multi-cellular aggregator box. So as we're kind of like driving by, I get that antenna, that cell antenna on this forward-facing antenna. As I go by, it kind of just like follows it all the way around. That was kind of fun, to be honest with you. But and then we immediately took it down at the end because this was not rigged for an at-sea environment, and put it away. But it just shows the opportunity. You could imagine having like a 360-degree cellular antenna up on the top of the mast. This is not in a preferred location. This is just a proof of concept, but you can imagine the ship-to-shore and ship-to-ship link opportunities that we could potentially do with 5G in the future. So those are awesome opportunities. Next slide. Aircraft carriers spend a lot of money on pier-side Wi-Fi. Why do we need it? So we just showed, let's put an enterprise-grade outdoor wireless access point. Let's extend pier-side Wi-Fi, and let's save some taxpayer dollars. So we did that. So a lot of the sailors, they rely on their phones and Wi-Fi for continuity of communications, as well as the ship interacting with those elements at shore. So that was incredibly effective. The more you provide sailors when they're at the pier, some of them actually stay in the vicinity of the pier, and we're able to have a safer and more fulfilling port call experience by being able, at reduced cost, by being able to do that. Next slide. All right, in summary, again, we executed a variety of demonstration projects. This is just scratching the surface to really show how you get after modern day speeds and what you do with that to enhance our operations at sea. And it's really been an amazing experience to take this journey over the last 2 years, taking it to this level and actually showing how it works at sea and the value it provides. So like, what's next? This is what's next. Executing the unified endpoint memo. Transitioning the capability to flank speed wireless, continuing to synergize off of our lessons learned, and just simply keeping the momentum. All right, so there's 2 slides on flank speed wireless. Next slide. Sorry, this is unified endpoint memo. Essentially, kind of what it says. Let's get everybody on the same network. That's the right answer. If we're on the same network, we are more likely to, right? We unify the ship to shore experience, the ship to support experience. We can all participate in that same element of readiness more effectively. That is an evolutionary journey that we'll work on. Next slide. And flank speed wireless is really continuing the synergy of the 4 elements that we developed and demonstrated, just continuing to harden them for enterprise-grade connectivity and being able to scale those to our ship and shoreside customers that want that capability, our fleet leaders that demand that capability for the sailors. All right, next slide. All right, that's what I got. So a couple shout-outs. There's a lot of folks that helped make this come together over the last couple of years. Damon Reagan, Bruce Mathers, Sean Peacock, Mr. Justin Finelli, Rob Wyborski and his team, Dan Jones, Rob Kurz and Jason Paper at AirPack, our ABE sailors, right? The ABE sailors were the ones that we worked on this day and night, like Sunday nights at 2 a.m. Like we are trying to figure this out. The ABE sailors would never give up at any moment because of the command culture that was set by our commanding officer. And with that, I'd like to conclude to allow Captain Reeby to come up if he has a comment or two before we go into a Q&A period. So Captain Reeby is a commanding officer of USS Abraham Lincoln who just completed our deployment, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Again, Captain Pete Reeby, call sign repeat. Great job, Kevin. I will tell you, Kevin White, best combat systems officer in the fleet. No questions asked. He has absolutely done amazing things on Abraham Lincoln and really set the stage for the rest of the fleet. I will tell you, when I think about bandwidth and what he brought to Abraham Lincoln, it really breaks down to three things for me. First of all is that we are all recruiters, right? We're bringing in the next generation of sailors, and the next generation of sailors grew up with a cell phone in their hand, and they are uncomfortable without it. I don't necessarily like that, but that's reality. And if we want to compete for the best folks coming into the Navy, we need to offer them bandwidth at sea, and we did that in an amazing way. Second one, I would say, is just the admin function of a ship, right? There is so many things. Every system built on that ship requires bandwidth. Most of the systems throughout the Navy, they're thinking about the ships a little bit, but let's face it, it's probably not the first thing they're thinking about. You know, we talked a little bit about the medical, dental, admin functions. All of that requires bandwidth, and this guy provided it to the ship, and we're able to make the ship run more smoothly, more efficiently. And then finally, the tactical use. Sometimes we turn this off, right? We spent most of our time in Fifth Fleet inside the weapon engagement zone of the Houthis. With this system, we're not going to get into the details, but this is not counter detectable. They did not know our location from what we were using. Now, when we went deep into the weapon engagement zone, we turned it all off, right? We turned the email traffic off. We turned the Wi-Fi off. That was more of an OPSEC thing. But this system, 107 days we went without a port call through the midst of our deployment, and the sailors being up on their Wi-Fi, being connected to home, is really what made that doable in this day and age. Great job on the brief. I'm going to give the mic back to Kevin to take your questions. Thanks for having us today.
Thank you, Captain. All right, so with that, we got about 15 minutes for questions. I believe the next briefing here is at 9:15. So right now it's 9:47. So if anybody has any questions, please ask hard questions if you like to. Sir?
On Monday, during a couple of the Don IT briefs, there were discussions about improving sailor training because of the requirement to have fleet support teams embarked or deployed for the ships. Do you see this as a viable solution to accommodate or replace the requirement to have the growing numbers of FST folks?
Yeah, love it. So the question for those listening online is how does this capability enable or enhance training? Okay, so we actually did a demonstration. I didn't have time to put it in here, but we worked with the Ready Relevant Learning team and NETSI team. There's specific training systems and circuits that provide that capability. And what we wanted to do was show how we can interoperate with those native schoolhouse training capacities from the Abraham Lincoln pretty much any time. That is a desired to-be state, but what we demonstrated was how we could run training classes from our training classrooms on the ship, accessing that native product base. So it offers the opportunity, should the fleet want to do that in the future, have augmented NEC training courses on the ship, saves them from going to the schoolhouse, while we provide a extensibility to those training systems and those networks to be able to do those modules. For example, like let's say you're a Canes NEC trainer. You actually go on systems at the schoolhouse to where you actually operate virtual machines and the like. We can do all that. All we're doing is accessing those virtual machines via technology over that circuit. So I do believe that offers an opportunity where we're able to connect with those circuits in the future to leverage onboard training. What it also allows us to do is more self-paced training. So there are kind of like restoring continuity of training and modules that we can also interoperate with on the ship over the network. We just need the transport path, and we can provide that. We can absolutely do that both from an official training capacity and then from an OJT, where sailors are able to exchange tech manuals, updated tech manuals with in-service engineering agents. We expect our sailors to be experts at the tech manuals. And by being able to exchange tech manuals, publications, both from an OJT perspective through in-service engineering agents, through Nautilus embarkables and large file transfer, therefore able to further enhance our technical skill sets even beyond what the training community can provide. So that's, yes, sir, the answer is yes.
So, Captain, what do you think this will do for maintenance, both while deployed, but also what about when pulling into shipyard?
Yeah, so we expect our sailors to be able to do all of the maintenance on the systems below the intermediate level, all right? Commonly, there is a challenge there to be able to do that purely because the average age on board Abraham Lincoln was 20.8 years old, all right? So every sailor was pretty much assigned a core system that they were responsible for right out of the gate as they got there. We expect them to be able to do all that, but sometimes that's an unforeseeable expectation. Sometimes the sailors just want to ask a question. Hey, I'm at this step, and I'm going to this next step. Am I doing the right thing? That can be the make or break at times, be successfully completing a maintenance procedure or not. And us being able to have that, just basically ask a question, really helped us in our ability to be more effective in our maintenance. What it also does is we can then, where we have communications with shipyards and ICAs, it also enables us to start to be able to get into more of that little intermediate level work if we're allowed to. So on board an aircraft carrier, we actually do have quite a production capability in the machine shop, 3D printing, and we are also experts at the technology in being safe within our work control procedures, working on high energy, high pressure, and those systems. And just by being able to have access, more reliable access to support resources, we definitely become more effective at maintenance. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah. And do you think there will be any impact of having that wireless capability when you go into shipping?
Okay, so that's a great question. So this, one of the things we get after by setting up standard guest Wi-Fi like capability through an approved policy manager is anybody that comes on board the ship, if you're a shipyard employee or if you're a government employee, if you have a Nautilus embarkable or an NMCI laptop, you can now connect that capability to the wireless, and you can operate no different than you were in a telework environment. Okay, so that was one thing. Anytime we would have support folks come to the ship, I would say, bring your NMCI laptop. Yeah, we got you. Also, too, the benefit that you get from that is when you have a cell phone on Wi-Fi, you can call right over voice over IP. So the shipyards are able, they bring their device online, they are able to operate, or any government or industry professional can operate when we're in maintenance period, no different than they are at their desk. So it absolutely provides that scalability. More questions? Sir?
Some of the PLEO constellations have different coverage depending on your latitude. Did you notice any change in coverage or throughput depending on equator?
Yeah, so the question is different PLEO footprints. Did we see any adjustments in coverage? I did. It's fascinating. So uniquely, while we were out there, we saw various new ground stations coming online that we were able to interoperate with. So a company or a constellation like the SpaceX Starlink constellation, they have relied, as they start to scale globally and get an increased footprint, they rely on optical laser crosslink for their global Earth coverage. However, as we saw a new ground stations come online, I watched the effect of that on our latency and throughput and our efficiencies. Same thing with the other modern, the other companies that are bringing capability online. We were mostly at latitudes where those service elements were in effect. However, as new ground stations come online, that's where we see the biggest effect. I was tracking throughput and latency to that ground station as a metric and filling out the experience on the ship. Another thing that I was tracking for the technical folks was bit error rate. As electromagnetic spectrum flows from ship to the satellite, constellation of fence bit flip the electromagnetic spectrum as it gets from end to end. As we have, by using SD-WAN, I could track the bit error rate, and a lower bit error rate is a more effective tactical stream of traffic that the user experience is better. So what we also did was looked at different bit error rates through the different providers, and then I was actually shaping the traffic accordingly at times based on what we need. So that did have an effect. However, we were at latitudes to where the service was pretty good. Any others? All right, thanks. Thank you for filling up the room, and please connect with. If you're Abraham Lincoln sailor, please raise your hand. Is there a couple in the back? All right, if you guys want fleet feedback, go to them, and I'll be around. Thank you for your time.